Like they call it the doghouse.
So this past weekend, Vasiliy Lomachenko defeated George Kambosos with a KO in the 11th round to capture the IBF lightweight world title, and it was an interesting fight because I think beforehand I always pretty much felt Lomachenko was going to win, and he pretty much fought out the way I thought he would. I never thought Kambosos was that special of a fighter. I think he's a solid fighter, but I don't think he's anything more than that. I thought that victory over Teofimo blinded a lot of people and got him thinking that he was better than he was. This is the reason why I didn't really rank Devin Haney's wins over him on an impressive scale, because I think he's good, but I just don't think he's that amazing. But with Lomachenko though, an amazing win, and I want to talk about today. Vasiliy Lomachenko is once again a world champion, and I do wonder, at this point in his career, is he starting to become a little bit underrated? Because if you look at Lomachenko, if we go years back, way before he fought Teofimo, people were talking about Vasiliy Lomachenko like he was possibly the best boxer to ever exist, and people can deny this now. This was a conversation I remember. Joe Rogan even spoke about it. I know Joe Rogan's not exactly the atlas for boxing, but I still think that says a lot that he was speaking about on such a high level, and everybody thought Lomachenko was something crazy. That little step around thing he used to do where he would jab and go to your side, and his obviously background in dance sort of had an influence on that, and the way he was beating people, stopping guys, he was exciting to watch. It was a little bit the way people talk about Naoya in a way now is, to me, the way Vasiliy Lomachenko was perceived back then, except on a higher level, I would say. And Lomachenko did it in multiple weight classes. He really has shown a lot, and to me, I feel like Lomachenko's reputation has took a bit of a dive in recent years, partially because obviously the losses to Haney in asterisk and to Teofimo. But I think one thing people got to understand, the 135 weight class has been full of weight bullies for a long time, and people might think I mean this in a negative way. Being a weight bully isn't a bad thing. The whole sport of combat sport in general has weight bullies in it. Some of the greats ever are probably weight bullies. You know, you could argue Canelo at a certain point was a weight bully. You could say the thing about Golovkin, Errol Spence, potential weight bully. You look at all these guys, they've always been quite big at 135. The likes of Ryan Garcia, Teofimo, and Devin Haney. Teo and Devin especially are the two ones I look at. Tank is less so a weight bully because he's very small, and his size, he doesn't really bully people, and he's more about his skill, his speed, and his footwork. So I think Tank I don't say, but I think Lomachenko, when he fought Teofimo, it was clear to see he was afraid of the power of Lopez. He didn't want to exchange with him. That's why he was backing off the whole fight. And Lopez did a good job of cutting the ring off and making sure Loma couldn't go anywhere, and did a good job of almost trying to essentially being the bigger man there. And I think it worked. It was a close fight, but it worked. And then the Devin Haney fight. Haney did a lot of great work to the body in the earlier rounds, which paid off. But in the middle to later rounds, I think Lomachenko took over, and really, Devin didn't really have much of an answer for him. And I think the one thing you want to look at both these fights, Haney and Teofimo were much bigger than Lomachenko, and yet he still put up a very competitive fight. Don't get it twisted. I felt Teofimo won the fight, but a lot of people still feel like Teofimo did actually lose the fight and Lomachenko won. Against Haney, everybody still talks about how it was a robbery. In my opinion, it was. I don't think Haney did enough to win the fight, but I look at it now and I think his only losses in his professional career have come in razor close fights to fighters who were much bigger than him. So I think Lomachenko's reputation does deserve a lot more respect. I think he needs to. I think at this point, I'd love to see him against Shakur. People start saying now that Lomachenko beats everybody at 135. I think Shakur gives him problems, but I still think that would be such an intriguing fight to watch to me. I think for Shakur it'd be a great fight, and Lomachenko really does have he has a great reputation amongst boxing fans, but some are a bit snobbish towards him because he has brought, to his credit, newer things in the sport of boxing like that. Like I said, the little hop to the side, that's not something that we had seen before. And the way Lomachenko fights in general is like something you haven't seen before. It is very much in full flow. It's like he's literally is in the Matrix and you can't touch him in there. And Kambosos, poor guy, in that 11th round, the way Lomachenko just went to the body, it was masterful. And Unfortunately, Kambosos is just not on the level of a Lomachenko, and not many people are, but I do feel like Lomachenko is at a point now, because of the way he is, he's not really reliant on speed or power. He could fight for a very, very long time still. Same sort of thing as Usyk. These guys who don't really rely on the power and the speed are not on their gifts. They rely on their ability to box and their acumen. I think it works so much better than being somebody who's more powerful and more athletic. And I think Lomachenko now, I think, a fight with Tank is there. A lot of people wanted Tank to fight Loma when he was 24, but I'll be honest, I don't see why there was such a rush with Tank. Now we need to see Tank fight these guys, and I think Tank and Loma, as is being talked about next, is such an intriguing fight because I feel like Tank will have a similar approach to Teofimo, but I don't think he has the physicality to also execute that game plan. He'll also stay away from Lomachenko a little bit, create the distance, look to land the left hand, and honestly, such a great fight, and I think there's so many fights still out there for Lomachenko. At the point of when he beat Teofimo, or lost to Teofimo even, there weren't many crazy fights out there for him. I think at that point they introduced the WBC, I think it was the franchise title at that point, and he had lost it and Haney had got the belt, but honestly, Lomachenko, the way he performed in that fight, and the way he's performed in the Haney fight and in the Tia fight, and he was injured in that Teofimo fight as well, so you got to give him respect. I think he's one of the greats of the sport, and I do think he has sort of become a bit underrated. Now people don't talk about him in the pound for pound list with the Crawfords, with the Inoues, with the Usyks, Canelos. He's in that category, I think I don't score pound for pound list. You've got the likes of Crawford, which I think should be near number one. Then Inoue, the Usyk in whatever order. After that, even with Canelo, you could possibly argue and put him over him, because his resume is very, very good. And I think when I look at Lomachenko, what he has done to some of the best fighters, like, I know we're going to talk about Teofimo losing to Kambosos, but Haney twice couldn't do what Lomachenko did to Kambosos. It was a relatively dull fight, those two, and he just outclassed him, whereas Loma outclassed him, but he also did it in such a way which was entertaining to watch. And I think, like, I'll maintain it, like, Lomachenko in full flight is such a great fight to watch. I don't know, physically he can't obviously go up to the 140s because they're just too big for him up there, but 135 I think he should be alright. I think Shakur isn't really that big at the moment for 135. I don't know, we have to see in his next fight whether he has really grown into the weight class yet, but he seems okay at the moment, and I think he's starting to get to the point where he's getting well filled out for the weight class. But for Lomachenko, though, he's in his 30s now. He's not going to grow that much, I think, or grow at all, actually. And I do think he does beat most people at 135. Him and Shakur would be an interesting fight. Him and Tank, honestly, I think he would cause Tank a lot of problems. I don't see Tank knocking him out in the way he knocks everybody else out, because Loma's so tricky and the angles. I know Floyd has taught Tank well. I know like Tank has a great team, but I genuinely don't think you can really bring in sparring partners to emulate what Lomachenko does because of the way he moves, the way he is. He's honestly such a genius and such a technician in there, and I think he deserves a lot more respect than he's got over the years. The Haney fight, honestly, the way he brought it to Haney really gave him hell, and I think he was so unlucky in that fight. Ultimately, I do think as well, there is a bit of a push from Top Rank with Lomachenko to now getting back in the limelight. He was fighting so frequently at one point, and I think taking some time off helped him a lot. And I think you look at Lomachenko as well, I do think if you look at the way he is as a fighter, he doesn't really get into trouble outside the ring like a lot of these. Most I saw like Eastern Europeans don't really do it. The likes of Usyk doesn't get, and same with Klitschko, but he lives the fighter's lifestyle, it seems, and I feel like that will pay dividends. I don't know. I do feel like Top Rank though was trying to push him again now, because he was their main guy at one point, and they're trying to get him back up there in the pound for pound rankings. And I think to do that, I think get him in there with Shakur. I personally think Shakur wins, but I don't think it's easy. I think Loma really does give him a lot of problems, and I think to beat Lomachenko, you do have to have that equalizer in your hands and have some power, because otherwise I don't think he's going to respect you, and that's when he starts walking you down and starts making you look a little bit silly. But I personally, though, I think Kambosos, he did alright in the fight, but he just hasn't got the physicality to compete with Lomachenko, and that was the difference. That's why you saw Teofimo do it. You know, Haney's big, but he's not an aggressive fighter, so he doesn't really work the same sort of way. And I do think with Haney as well, I mean, we've seen this in obviously his last fight, but he has vulnerabilities, and I think if Lomachenko stepped on the gas a little bit earlier, I think he could have really put some damage on Haney, and possibly now, I'd like to see those two fight again. I think it's the one fight where I do think Lomachenko, as we all know, did get a hard time in that fight, and I feel now would be interesting. He's never going to beat Teofimo. I mean, let me rephrase. He could beat Teofimo, but it's just a very unlikely with how big Teo is. And at 140, like I said, 135 is the limit. Teo, I mean, Loma's not going past that. Could we maybe see him go down, maybe in a new way? I don't think so, personally, but maybe. You never know. There are some fights out there for him. I think Tank and Shakur are the two fights I would look at, though, if I'm Lomanchenko. I think they're the two money fights. Obviously, Shakur, I don't know if he's still with Top Rank or if he's leaving after this next fight, but Shakur's still around there, and I think Tank is now willing to negotiate with anybody. So I personally think the Lomachenko hype train is well and truly still alive, and I think there's still so much for him to give in the sport, and I do think, don't count him out, I could definitely see him becoming undisputed at 135 in the next few fights. But yeah, just my thought though on Lomachenko. I do think as well him and Frank Martin could be an interesting fight. So there's still a lot of guys out there for him, but just my thoughts on Lomachenko. I think he's become a little bit underrated, and I think people need to respect this guy. This guy was at one point the best fighter in the world, and you don't lose that. He clearly hasn't lost any step. He's still as good as he once was, and I think, like Roy Jones said, y'all must have forgotten. I think people are forgetting who this guy is. But yeah, just my thoughts on Lomachenko. Let me know in the comments below, and yeah, until next time.